Hi there, Karen Flaherty here from Living by Human Design. Hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to be talking about the gate 50, which is typically called the gate of values. Okay, so we got the Sun in gate 50. It started on October 19th and it goes until October 25th. And we've got the Earth in gate 3. So we've got the 50 right here coming off the spleen, one of the fear gates, but it's called 50, and it's the gate of values. And then we got the 3 coming off the bottom of the sacral, which is usually called trouble at the beginning. Or initiation. So we do have no definition this week. None of the centers are colored in. So if there are any gates that hook up with your gates, then you'll have those centers defined, but otherwise not. And there are some planets that are still retrograde. That's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So we've got the Sun in gate 50, which is called values. It's also called the cauldron. It's as if all the values of the tribe or the culture are in this cauldron and we mix the soup and we're all together in it, right? It's a combination of individual empowerment and cultural empowerment or group empowerment. So they say that it's the value of historical continuity whose traditional values serve and enrich the present and the future. And so it's basically about keeping those values and adhering to those values and really embracing those values and making sure that they work for everybody. That's the idea. And in the incarnation crosses this week, it's the cross of laws, which is a very potent kind of energy. It's the cross of values and the cross of witches. And then in the gate 3, we've got difficulty at the beginning or ordering. So it's making sure that things are in the right order so that it's sometimes called the cosmic chaos. But it's about ordering. It's about getting things in order. The cosmic chaos would be on the shadow side, right? When you have difficulty at the beginning, it's usually just a warning to kind of look both ways and make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted before you get into something when you're starting a project. It's also a good time to check in with your gut, your sacral, if you are either a generator or manifesting generator, and make sure that you really want to do this and move forward with it. So they say that it's the fundamental challenge of initiation, starting stuff, is to transcend confusion and establish order, right? So it's ordering order from the chaos. And in the gene keys, chaos, of course, is the shadow, and innovation is the gift, and innocence is the CD. So for the gene key 50, it's actually pretty interesting because the shadow is corruption, the gift is equilibrium, and the CD is harmony. Because this is all about values, what happens is that a lot of times our cultures, our communities, our government or education or any kind of bureaucracies are hierarchical, right? There's a hierarchy in them. And what Richard's saying is that really when we get to the point, the most empowering it will be for all of us is when we all have individual freedom. So you can still have, kind of a hierarchy. There's always going to be somebody in charge, right? But they should all be helping people to get their individual freedoms and to feel as if they're all equal, right? That's the idea of the equilibrium. Everybody's equal. And there are some people who can manage things better than others. And so you put them in charge. And it doesn't mean that they're the best or they're the brightest or they're anything different than the others. It's just that everybody gets to do what they're best at, their tasks that they're best at, and contribute in a way that makes the most sense for them. And then you're reporting into somebody just so that they know what's going on, right? As opposed to, the president and the managers and the people who are, the workers kind of, so it's not really a worker bee mentality as much as it is everybody doing what they're best at and doing the best at it and really being passionate about it and having a good time at it. It can be very freeing to have that kind of an environment. And so in the graphic, he says, cultivate awe, cultivate peacefulness, and cultivate truth. He also says when the frequency running through a whole society decreases, chaos and corruption rule. So basically operating at a lower frequency is where we get the corruption and the greed, and people get oppressed, right? And suppressed and repressed. And that's not good for anybody because then nobody's living their dream except for maybe the people at the top, but he says they're also victims. The people at the bottom are victims. The people at the top are victims of this hierarchy too. It's not like they're happy. They're not living the dream. I mean, a lot of them are miserable. And so why not have everybody have the happiness that in the freedom that makes the most sense for them. He also says the higher subtle bodies of humankind are designed to self-organize into potent and coherent formations of awakening beings. And so really the more we can raise the frequency of ourselves, of people around us, and keeping our own frequency high will raise the frequency of the group. And this Gene Key 50 is very good at that. He likes to, Richard says that basically walking into a room will change the demeanor of the room for somebody with this 850 in their incarnation cross somewhere. So somebody who has the cross of laws or wishes, they're going to have a big effect on the equilibrium of the group and making sure that everybody gets heard. So some of the personalities born in this gate, Benjamin Netanyahu, who I just saw an interview with him, and he's got a book coming out this week. I'm taking a look in depth at Alfred Nobel. I thought that might be interesting since this is so much about values and part of the defense circuit, this gate 50. I thought it might be interesting to look at his chart. Who created the Nobel Prize, Timothy Leary, Johnny Carson, Bobby Seale, Dizzy Gillespie, John Lithgow, Mickey Mantle, the baseball player, Tom Petty, who passed away a few years ago, singer, Snoop Dogg, and Sir James Chadwick. Okay, so taking a look at Alfred Nobel, he was born on October 21st of 1833 in Stockholm, Sweden. He was a generator with a 2-4 profile, and he was the Reinecke Cross of Laws. So he started out as a chemist, but he was also an engineer, inventor, became a businessman, and eventually a philanthropist. But that is because he was best known for having bequeathed his entire fortune to establish the Nobel Prize in 1895 in his will, so that whenever he died, the Nobel Prize would start, and actually he died the next year. And he also made several important contributions to science, holding 355 patents in his lifetime. But the biggest one was the invention of dynamite. And that's what led to his change of heart later in life when he saw what the dynamite was used for in wars and things like that he wasn't happy about. Originally, it was used for, as you can imagine, mining and construction and creating structures where there might be stone. And so they would dynamite it out. And, he was fine with that. But when it came to wars and, using it for destruction of people, that he wasn't happy about at all, even though he made quite a bit of money from it. He was very, very, very wealthy and never married, never had children. And so all of his money went to almost all. He left some money to a few relatives. But he actually started thinking about it only a few years before that, only a few years before he created the will, because somebody had gotten a mistaken headline that he had died. And he hadn't died. It was his older brother who had passed away. But the story that was written was very upsetting to him. And he did read it. They don't know how upsetting it was, but as a result, he created the Nobel Prize. So I think it was upsetting for him to be noted as the inventor of dynamite and creating so much havoc with the dynamite in, of course, Sweden, which is a very peace-loving country. So it was very much against the values of the culture. And that's why I wanted to take a look at his chart, because Sweden is known for being peaceful and a neutral country. Creating dynamite and then having it used in wars was not his intention. And so it's interesting to take a look at his chart. He is the Cross of Laws, and but he does have the entire defense circuit defined. So not only does he have the 50, but it's connected to the 27, which is all about responsibility. So the 50 is values, 27 is responsibility, the 59 is intimacy and sexuality, and the 6 is all about literally defense. It's the warrior, it's the protectress, it's the peacemaker, actually. So it can be the warrior or the peacemaker. Every gate has its balance, right? Back and forth. And so it can be both the warrior and the peacemaker, but it's about defense. It's about protecting the people around you. So whether it's through war or peace, you can choose, but it's always about taking care of your people. And so he really had a problem with the way as I said, the dynamite was being used. He also had the gate of commitment, which is all about, once he makes a commitment, he's going to keep it. And this Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prizes, which were given out in at first in the things that he was very interested in, which included literature and peace, of course, and art and a few other things and then they added to it over the years. Oh, the sciences, of course, because he himself was a chemist and engineer. So he had prizes in chemistry and biology and things like that. So it really was implemented very well and gracefully, and certainly honors him over 100 years later, right? And so he also had the gate of depth, which is the gate 48 over here. So he had the spleen, the root, the solar plexus, and the sacral, and that was it. 3 out of the 4 motors he had. So he was emotional, but it was probably very mild, a very mild way for him because he was not in relationship. I couldn't find any indication of a relationship anytime in his life. And then over here, the other part of the defense circuit goes to the spleen. And the spleen is all about nurturing. It is about fears also, but it's mostly about nurturing. And so he was, not known to be a nurturing person, but it would go against the grain for him to be hurting as opposed to nurturing. He had the root and the 360, the channel 360, which is all about really about evolution and growth. And so he was someone who was always reading and always had tons of books around and a massive library, and just was always into the arts and literature and whatever he can find in the sciences, and then became quite a businessman as well. He was very prosperous with the money he created from his inventions. He also had the gate 21, which would make him seem very controlling. He did have that reputation. 13 is the listener. And he probably did listen quite a bit to the people who were reacting to his inventions. 56 is the storyteller. 35 is all about change. So he did enjoy change in his life. 49 is about principles and revolution. And so he was someone who, would have held to the principles that he grew up with, as well as the values of, his culture of Sweden, being a very peace-loving country. He had this entire channel of the 18 to the 58, which is called the channel of correction. And so the 18 is all about correction, and the 58 is the reason that we do the correction. It's to bring people closer to the joy of life. 58 is all about the joy of life, and that's actually up in his it's in his south node, so it would have been the first 40 years of life, where it was most prominent. He does have the 8 in his Chiron, which indicates that he's making a creative contribution to the world, which I would suggest he does. And by the way, he also has the 50 down in his Venus. So he really valued the tribal values or the cultural values that were so indicative there. And the 60 was in his Neptune, which means that was kind of his spiritual nature and or a spiritual job for him was to evolve. The 60 is all about evolution and growth. And he did that quite nicely. And by the way, the 60 is also in his unconscious earth. So he had the 60 3 times in his chart and the 50 twice in his chart. And so these become themes. These become really strong themes for him. Let's see what else. He's got the 2-4, which is that we call the natural. In the profiles, it's the hermit opportunist. So he was quiet and studious and did what he needed to do to create all these patents and to be a great businessman. But he also could be out and about and making opportunities and finding opportunities and knowing which opportunities to pounce on. Let's see what else. In his moon, his conscious moon, he had the 41, which is all about creativity, and he was very creative for a chemist and engineer. 39 is all about provocation. I think we can assume he was that. 52 is all about concentration, and so he was someone who could, sit down in the laboratory and create what he was up to. And finally, the 38 is the gait of the fighter. And so he was someone who wasn't going to sit back and basically take what other people said. He was going to fight for what he believed in. And I think he did. So by creating the Nobel Prizes, he has created a really lasting legacy of peace and acknowledgement of the sciences and the arts around the world. And he made it clear that there would be no he made it clear in his will that one of the tenets of the Nobel Prize would be that no country and no type of people could be excluded. Everyone was included, and they could be nominated by the experts in the chosen fields that they were being nominated for. So it was a very egalitarian way of doing this prize, and much different than you can imagine the 1800s were even in Sweden. And so he was someone who was much less hierarchical and much more, as Richard calls it, heterarchical, which is much more, kind of even keeled, and everybody has an equal voice, and we have equilibrium and egalitarianism and equality. So he was all about that. So I hope that you have a great week. I hope that you get a chance to see where your own values in your own family or career or culture show up this week. And, perhaps they'll show up in the news. It's always interesting to see how those things kind of coincide with what's going on with the gates that are in the sun this week. So the 50 will be in the sun, and I hope you have a great week. I hope it's a pleasant week for you, and that you get a lot done of whatever it is you're up to. Take care. Be well. I'll see you next time.